Well, my husband had died very suddenly, and I was in a state of absolute shock. My life was a nightmare, and Bonnie, I had to go to work right away. One of Randy's pictures that he'd made, there was a lawsuit against it. California is a community property state, so I was responsible monetarily for his lawsuit. And we had 5 years to go before the 7 years of statute of limitations. So they froze all my money to hold it for the lawsuit. And so I had to go to work immediately. Like 3 weeks after he died, I had to go to work. I had no money for anything. Couldn't cash any money, couldn't take my money out of the bank. It was a living nightmare. And one of the jobs I got was to do No, No, Nanette in a theater in the Round in Massachusetts. And Bonnie was playing the lead in that show, and I was playing the second character, Betty, and I think it's the name of it. And Bonnie was adorable to me. I would show up and cry. I would show up and do the show, and then she would take me out and get me something to eat and let me cry about my husband and my life and what was going on. And she was so patient with me and so adorable. I would never be able to thank her. And so when show was over and I went back home, or I went out and did other shows, when she got her series, she called and she said, "Nan, like Mary," she said, would you be embarrassed if I asked you to play my mother?" And I said, "No, I would love to." And I did the show, and again, it was that kind of magical thing that can happen once in a while. All of the love and affection that I had for Bonnie showed up on the screen when we were doing the show. And I had other commitments, so I couldn't be a regular, but I was a semi-regular on that show for the rest of the run for almost 7 years. And it was marvelous. We never did establish what my character would be. Sometimes I was flighty and silly, and sometimes I was a serious, loving mother. And sometimes I was whatever they wrote. And I liked doing that too. One time I took off and came back with a young lover, a young boyfriend. I mean, that's a new kind of character for me. But it was wonderful because Bonnie had that magic on the show. She was the heart and soul. She kept that show together. And she was a great editor, and she was also a great director. I think she wound up directing some of the shows. She's a brilliant, brilliant talent, and also a great friend. I loved doing that show. I think that was the last series I had ever. Yeah, I loved it.
What was the relationship like between the two characters, the mother and daughter? Were they close?
It was very loving, yes. It was very loving. But you can't have just two people who love each other. You have to have conflict. And so I had to give her a bad time now and then, for whatever reason, whatever they wrote. Like in real life, mother and daughter can love each other, but there's a time when they really don't like each other. Life is like that. We portrayed life on that show.
What about working with the rest of the cast? The girls, Valerie and Mackenzie?
They were darling. We're talking about it. The reason shows run a long time is because the characters on screen and off screen can find a way to relate to each other, to get along. Chemistry is the big word. They had chemistry. They had a big problem with poor Mackenzie with her drug problems, but they tried to carry her along and help her through that. I was never aware of any of that. They kept that away from me. I don't know how that would happen. Once I came in and she was asleep on a mat on the floor, and they just said, "Well, we won't rehearse these scenes." I didn't know what was going on, They kept it very private. That was nice of them to do that for her.
And what about Pat Harrington?
Well, Harrington is Pat Harrington. He's what you see on the screen is what you get. That's Pat, on screen and off screen. Funny, creative man. They would write a funny scene for him, and then he would find another way to say it. He was always rewriting his lines. And sometimes they were funnier. Not always, but sometimes. Pat really, I think, would have loved to have written the whole show, written everything, do everything. But he was Pat. He was wonderful. And the audience loved him. We loved him. But he gave us a little problems with rewriting scenes.